We'll kick it off now. So I just want to do a quick introduction of myself, and then I'll pass it over to the panelists. So Alec Emmert, I'm the CEO of Services School. I did not have the privilege of serving as an enlisted veteran. I was a officer, so I had my butt saved many times by my enlisted sailors, and I am so glad that we're having more enlisted veterans joining the ranks of MBAs and going to business school. And we've got three fantastic guests right here, and I'd like to just go across the screen. We'll kick it off with Devin. Can you just give us a little bit of your background? And one of the things I'm really interested in learning about is how you went from serving enlisted to business school. Did you get your degree while you were still serving, or did you get it after you got out and then apply to business school? And then, each of you can kind of go through that story about how you got to business school.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks, Alec. Yeah, Devin Trammell. I grew up in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, which a surprising amount of service members are familiar with, given the Pensacola, Hurlburt, Eglin, dive school, all that stuff. Grew up there, low income family. Military was kind of like my way out, and I saw it as like a way to go get a degree, which I'm here, so very successful in that. Uh, Joined the Air Force, visited all the branches, went to the classic strip mall and tried them all, and ended up liking the Air Force the most. Joined to do EOD work, so I became an explosive ordnance disposal technician. Basically, as soon as I graduated EOD school, so I was about a year into service, I started doing the dabbling in night classes, taking CLEPs. I then did what many people do, and I went to AMU. And then over about 6 years of EOD, I did classes at night and at AMU, which look great for your performance reports, but not a phenomenal degree to have on your record. And so after hitting essentially junior year, about 90 credits, I transferred over to Indiana University online, which is one of these universities you'll hear about, like ASU, like LSU, where it doesn't say online on your degree, and they actually have a tremendous amount of options for you to go with. I was very interested in a STEM career field, so I took on a math major, which I regretted very quickly, but I finished it. And then as I transitioned out, I did 10 years. I was applying to MBA programs and for September to matriculate in September. And I actually wrapped my degree up in May. So I have the unique position of I was applying to programs before I had an undergraduate degree, which plenty of conversations, and I'm happy to talk more about that and how that looked and which schools were very helpful and which ones weren't. But that was kind of my long journey to getting what I consider a good undergraduate degree and making it into an MBA program.
Awesome. Good stuff. Over to you, Liam.
Great. Yeah, so I actually grew up one of five and had a year of college under my belt. I was playing lacrosse and not doing as well academically as I probably should have, not quite applying myself, and felt unfulfilled, felt like I was lacking internal drive, and left school and decided to enlist. Found my way into security forces in the Air Force and was fortunate enough to end up at Joint Base Andrews. And after an Iraq deployment and then 2 years of working as the liaison with Secret Service and Department of State and other agencies around the Air Force One, Air Force Two mission, made the decision to get out. It was a great experience, like really kind of a highlight reel, but realized, especially after talking with partners at places like State, that there were other opportunities on the federal side. And the closer I got to getting out, I got out and I was finishing up my degree. I had about 45 credits left that I pushed through in the year following my getting out. The more I talked to people and realized that there were similarities across the military and gov agencies, that were things that I maybe didn't want to keep from the military anyway. And so I kind of started to look around and see what else was out there. And I was actually home in South Bend, at the University of Notre Dame at a tailgate with my family, and ran into family friends of ours who grew up in the military family. And she was the head of graduate career services at Notre Dame. And so she talked about what could be if I wanted to look at something like an MBA. And so kind of then threw myself into the application process as I finished undergrad, through UMGC. So, and finished that up with political science. I think UMGC is pretty widely used by the enlisted community, but it was good to me for getting undergrad done.
Good stuff. And over you, Austin.
Hey guys, thanks Alec, and nice to see you again, Devin and Liam. Familiar face. I'm not 100% sure if we've met in person, but it's glad to hear you're doing well. Easiest moniker is Austin from Houston. Grew up in the South, born and raised. Originally went to college to be like a collegiate athlete, to be a swimmer. Went to University of Alabama. Absolutely loved it. Monetarily did not. It was pre NIL, pre Title IX, not evening things out for the boys, if you know what I mean. And I actually wanted to be a pilot. It's like I wanted to go to space, wanted to be an astronaut growing up. Was not going to be an option being enlisted. So I was like, well, what's the next hottest thing? Well, at the time, people were blowing up. So I decided to figure out if I could go Navy EOD. Did it, West Coast, a couple deployments. My academic journey actually started during my second deployment, a little bit late in the game. I took classes back online through Alabama, kind of had the chip on their shoulders, like, do I want to finish this project? Do I want to do something different? I felt that at age 25, 26, I was a little bit different of like kind of perceiving the world and what I wanted out of it than I was at like 18, 19. So I decided to actually lose some credits, go back in person to New York, finished at Columbia. Joke was on me. As soon as I got to Columbia, about a semester and a half in, the global pandemic happened. Everything went back to being remote. So it wasn't exactly the best foresight decision. And then like Devin, I actually applied to MBA programs while finishing undergraduate studies. Also happy to talk about that and finished at Wharton.
Cool, good stuff. So, all right, I'll tell you what, Austin, because this seems like a pretty popular topic. So we'll kick it back to you about the there's kind of like two elephants in the room when you're applying to an MBA program. It's your undergraduate degree and your work experience, right? Because a lot of times schools will say, how much, post undergrad work experience do you have? Does like enlisted service count? That's a question many people have. And then also navigating the challenges that you had where you're kind of still wrapping up your undergraduate degree. How were you able to craft that narrative so schools are still willing to take a chance on you since your GPA hadn't still fully been solidified? So Austin, I'll kick it over to you and then we can go back. And I know Devin's got some stuff to talk about that one as well.
Yeah, so a little bit of a hot button topic also for me because when you get into the technicalities of like putting together a package of any grad school application, word space and wordsmithing is really like a math problem and solving backwards. And in a lot of these grad school applications, there is the question box that says how many years of post undergrad work experience do you have? And usually, as an enlisted veteran, not always, some already have finished degrees. They have to put 0 and then use up valuable application space to actually basically defend how many years of full-time work experience they have, despite answering that question to 0. And AgComs will not let you, unless it is actually post-grad, answer that. That's a different little bit of a dog I have in me to get that fixed, per se. For me, I had about 7.5 total years after I left college initially. I started a business and was teaching a lot of things, but also like swim lessons around the Texas area, and then enlisted for about 6 years in a month. So I basically talked about that and crafted my narrative to be married to the timeline of my life, which included enlistment, and why I was ready to go into basically a peer group in a professional space of something that I felt like I was ready for, and use the timing of my decisions and my career arc. Given I'm leaving the military, did not see global pandemic happening. I wanted to do things in person that kind of got stripped away. Let's have a second bite at the apple. And my enlisted time, given it was the most recent significant chunk, being 6+ years, bared the grunt of my application space, but it really was a personal brand application.
Cool. And then just to be clear, so you had to click 0. It was 0 years. You had to put that technicality in there, and then you were able to explain it afterwards, and it didn't stop you from getting into Wharton.
It did not. It did not stop me from getting anywhere. The only place that did not had a conditional acceptance is actually the place that I applied was Kellogg at Northwestern, because they institutionally, at least that's what they told me, could not accept somebody until they had a matriculated degree. And when you're getting application admissions in like March timeframe, and you're graduating somewhere between like May through, if you're taking any summer class, June or even July. That's a long time to wait and either defer or have multiple deposits out. Yeah.
Gotcha. Excellent. And Liam, how did the process work for you? Did you have your undergrad degree finished when you applied to Notre Dame? And then how did you navigate the work experience question?
Yeah, so what was great was during my work experience. Well, it's kind of interesting. Like one of the work experience question, school dependent. I had a conversation with a school that led to my own frustration with like we don't look at this as work experience. That kind of led to this catalyst of Devin and I talking and growing a bit of a community for enlisted folks going to MBA. But I was applying during my last semester at UMGC. So I got my acceptance like 10 days after I'd graduated.
Oh, wow.
Or no, sorry, 10 days prior to graduating. And so Notre Dame was super comfortable with saying, hey, we see the trajectory, we see the grades you're getting. We're not really worried about your ability to finish. And so that was really exciting for me.
Awesome. Good stuff. And Devin, how did that work out for you in Stanford?
Yeah, I really liked like Austin's description. I actually took the opposite approach, a classic enlisted trope of like ask for forgiveness, and I just put 10 years of experience in all those boxes and used MySpace to be like, this is why I think this is experience. And some schools that didn't land well on, and some schools were like, yeah, we get it. We basically overgeneralize because we don't want to see people putting internship experience, right, in their application. So it worked out great. I was a little silly to like not even question that at all until we had a guy come into Enlisted ExFil that actually like talked to every school's admissions committee that he wanted to go to, and he got a bunch of yeses and nos and tracked that. And I was like, that makes sense why I got some yeses and nos from different institutions. But Stanford was super, super supportive. Again, I didn't bring it up at all. And then when I got the admissions call, congratulations, this, that. And like during that time, I was like, you know, I haven't graduated, right? And they were like, yeah, that's fine. Like just send us, like you start like September 15th, just send us your degree before September 15th and we're good. So that was like a big weight off my shoulders, and like very happy that they see things that way as well as it sounds Wharton and Notre Dame.
That's awesome. And there's, so one thing I'll touch on. So I'd actually be interested. I'm going to kick it back to you, Austin. So both Devin and Liam, so you guys got your degrees while you were actually serving, and you got your DD 214, went to business school. Now, Austin, so you went to Columbia, you got out, so you had a few years of college, and then you went straight to business school from college. If you had to do it over again, would you have preferred to have just gone straight to business school, like got your degree got your degree while you were serving, and then gone straight to business school? Or did you feel there was a lot of value in getting the full undergrad experience, then going straight to business school?
One, it's a great question. And I think it's entirely personal. My situation was, I had lived pretty much everywhere in the US except for a couple of Midwest states and on the East Coast north of Fort Benning, Georgia, so most of the East Coast. And I wanted to figure out, how do I fit in these different places and spaces? And like, I don't know what I don't know. And what better place to figure that out in New York? So my like idea at the time was, let's go rip it, get a couple internships in or out of New York City in a couple different industries. I was still thinking about a JD MBA, maybe just a JD, maybe an MBA. Do I even want to do grad school? Do I want to do consulting and get that to be sponsored and paid for and save my benefits maybe for future posterity, which I don't even have yet? I didn't have any of these questions answered. So I just wanted to go in person and just do it, right? Kind of the enlisted thing and just smash your face against the wall. And for me, that was the right choice, despite pandemic making things being more remote. I don't have any regrets. I have a lot of really great friends that I met outside of other veterans being there, but also like walking onto a sports team, some really, really close, like you're finding a new tribe and getting in person as quickly as possible, because I think there's a lot of benefits to being remote. But I also think that there's a lot of benefits to exploration. I think that one of the undertones of people that enlist or just serve in the military generally, they're adventurers and explorers and risk takers. And for me, that was a risk that I was willing to take.
Gotcha. Good stuff. And then, so did you feel like the internships you had when you were working your way through Columbia fed into what you did at Wharton, or how did you feel like that direct undergrad to grad school experience was in terms of creating it basically like a career arc, like doing a few internships and then really kind of dialing in what you wanted to do?
My specific situation was like, uh, I'm gonna try to figure out if I want to do consulting and just figure that out. If I could at least get an offer in hand, had a full-time offer, I could put that on my resume. That even if I don't go and sign this thing and do it for a couple of years, at least I can show people that I didn't just do an internship. I actually like was offered a job and chose to go to business school instead of taking that job, right? Like, and I actually value the experience of getting around peers for different sorts of reasons. And it kind of doubled down on the personal brand and choice of why am I still choosing to do this versus all these other potential options? Because it's a big world. You're kind of you're self-selecting into these AgCom brains of how does this person fit into our pool of applicants? How does Austin or Devin or Liam or Alec or whoever is listening, why would we choose to bring you into our community? Like, what are they giving up? What is their opportunity cost? And for me, it was full-time job offers, and I wanted to let them know that.
Gotcha. No, that's really helpful. And so we're gonna kick it over to the everybody's favorite topic, the GMAT and the GRE. So I'll throw this out to the group and see who wants to jump on it first. How did you balance studying for the GMAT or GRE, and you can say which one you chose and why? Actually, I think that'd be helpful. And balance that along with your undergraduate coursework and your service. How'd you make it work, and how'd you get the score you needed to succeed?
Oh man. Yeah. So I love the way you framed that. It was service, it was undergraduate coursework, and I also had the great fortune of having a 3-month-old baby. So I was in the throes of it, is the best way I can describe it. I had a pretty strict schedule and an amazing partner who supported me through that schedule, which what that looked like in practice was I was up around 4 a.m. and 4 to 7 was just me studying for the GMAT and the GRE. 7, wake the kids up, get them to school by 8, into the office by like 8:30, work till like 4 or 5, come home, 5 to 7 is family time, put the kids down, eat dinner with my wife, and then 7 to midnight is, well, I'd say like 7 to 10 was MBA applications, and 10 to midnight was finishing undergrad work. So it was a lot, and it was about a year and a half of that. Just because I wanted to, I mean, yeah, you can tell it took me a lot of time. I was making little progress in all those things, because I had so much going on. And then this is probably my favorite failure story, and like one that I love to tell because I hope it helps somebody else. I was applying, I knew I wanted to go to Stanford the most, which is a hard pill to swallow. The thing you want the most is the hardest one, supposedly. And so I was calling people here, calling vets at Stanford, and one Air Force guy was lucky enough to mentor me. And one thing he told me really early on, which I did not listen to, and anybody who's listening, please God, listen to this, was sit down and look at the rules of the GMAT and take an at-home, legit, like GMAT practice test. Take a day and do that. Follow the rules, follow the timing, set timers. Don't do anything you would not be allowed to do on test day. And then either take a day or take a week and do that for the GRE. And then look at the percentiles. And there's a pretty good chance you score a significant higher percentile on one or the other. And if you don't, then there's a pretty good chance you feel good about one, or feel better about one than the other. Very similar to Austin. I like STEM, like I like astronaut. Like I was like, I think I'm this like technical person, and so I want to take the GMAT because technical people take the GMAT and not the GRE. And I'm a non-traditional applicant and a vet, and so I want to take the GMAT. And so I bought all the books. I did that. I just did the GMAT practice. I got 50th percentile, humbling. Got all the books, all whatever you can imagine, the big ass books in the mail. Shipped them to me and studied for 6 months, December to June. Studied, went into the testing center, took the test, grueling couple hours. The score flashes on the screen, 50th percentile. I've never felt dumber in my entire life. And that was like, I think in the process, my biggest like question mark in the whole process for me. Was like, holy shit, is this possible? Like, is this possible for me? Took a couple of days off. That was like on a Wednesday. By Saturday, I was like, maybe I'll take this GRE practice test. Took the GRE practice test, scored a 70th percentile on my first try, never, like, not knowing any of the rules. Got a tutor for 4 weeks because I realized, like, I racked my brain, why didn't this work for me? And it was like, this isn't your learning style, Devin. Like, you're not like a raw memorization reading person. You learn better by bouncing stuff off people and talking to someone. Got a tutor, and 3 weeks later scored 90th percentile on the GRE, and was like, holy shit, I wasted 6 months of my life, but it's too late at this point to worry and press forward. So don't do what I did.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, I think that there are some universalities there with both tests, so I wouldn't necessarily say it was wasted. But you know, I feel you. I feel you on that. So yeah, it is like if you struggle with a standardized test, you are in very good company because pretty much everybody does. It's just kind of a brute force method, and what Devin was talking about. So if you're like looking for some motivation there. Waking up at 4 a.m., getting 4 hours of sleep, like there you have it. Like where there is a will, there is a way, and that is a very well earned Stanford degree, man. So congrats to you and all the work you put into that. I want to see if Liam and Austin wanted to throw up, any other wisdom they had from their GMAT/GRE experience in there.
I can chime in here. I think my challenge was that I didn't realize that I was going to apply to MBA until probably mid-September or end of September. And so as a result of that, I'm doing like maybe 19 credit hours that semester for college, and just did not manage time well. And as a result of it being a rushed process, definitely felt like I rushed the testing the most. And looking back, wish that I had done a lot more research. And so people who are on this call, what's great is that in a lot of ways, you're doing your own research right now about this process. And so this is a great opportunity for you to now say like, okay, I can take even more time to research great ways to prepare. I also did the tutor thing, and thankfully was able to raise my scores enough to feel good enough that I could get into business school. But definitely something that I would have prepped far more in advance for had I known that I was going to make that career pivot.
Was a bit type A about it. I had an amazing mentor through service to school, who was an officer at Naval Academy, had gone straight to Stanford, and then to do a master's, and then done his rest of his time as a naval officer. And he had felt a little bit jaded about his recommendation process, and basically wanted to be like the golden mentor for other people. Insofar as he actually convinced me to skip round 1 and then go round 2, because we wanted to quote unquote golden package it out and get the score up. I don't know what it would have been like in round 1 applications. The 5 schools I was going to apply to in round 1 and then 3 more round 2 ended up being just the 5 schools in round 2. And I think it was a good decision. Went like significantly like a standard deviation up on my 3rd attempt. It was a remote one at the time. Prior to that year, I took the GRE. I took a little practice test of each one. My deciding factor was actually the GRE worked for law school and many top law schools. I think now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think now GMAT also works for law school and other top grad programs. That was a new change. If I had known at the time, it would have been a much harder decision on which one to go with, because I think it was like it was like a 1 or 2% difference for your answer, Devin. It would have been like hot potato, like 50-50. But for me, it was like, it gave me more optionality. So I just went to the GRE and just put the foot on the gas.
Good stuff. And you were doing this while you were still while you were at Columbia. Like, what time of year were you doing this? Like fall of or no, it must have been spring of your junior year, was it? Or
yeah, so I reclassed. I was originally going to do basically kind of not take it slow, but like slightly over minimum credit hours to be full time in 3 years, and then rapidly accelerated to graduate in under 2, which meant a couple of semesters of that, like 19 or 20. Was not waking up at 4 a.m. Was not doing it with a 3-month-old. I was full-time recruiting. I was doing full-time athletic stuff until the Ivy League canceled in-person competitions. So there were like some pluses and minuses. But I think that actually going to remote helped time manage that a little bit better, and having that time while on active duty, similar to Devin and Liam, of taking those remote classes and having that, like, I have done this blocking and tackling before in a different environment. This is nothing. This is not like a 12-hour time difference. Like this is pancake. Like let's just stack on a couple extra classes and yeah, we'll study for a test that clearly doesn't matter that much, you know?
Yeah, no worries. Well, good stuff, man. And so the next question I'm going to ask is like we look at all the different facets of the application, and one of the things we get a lot of questions about is who to write your recommendations. And given serving as an officers, typically as a junior officer, the closest relationship you're going to have is probably either with your department head, the XO, or the CO. And that's usually who we see officers getting their recommendations from. Now, when you're enlisted, you're typically your closest relationship is with your whether it be your first sergeant. I'm not sure the different vernaculars in the Air Force and the Army. In the Navy, it's going to be your chief or your senior chief. Now, who did you all pick to write your recommendations and why? And Austin, you're just talking, so we'll kick it off to you, and then we'll do the reverse snake back to Devin.
Sure. I'll do undergrad. My most significant one was the officer, my OIT that I had for the longest, because they were one class ahead of us in EOD school pipeline. Basically had known them for like the majority of, if not all of my current active duty time. And we were very close, and I almost was on his team for my second deployment. But for MBA, I actually went with a professor that basically approached me and said, like, Austin, I know you want to go, like, if you need an applicant, he approached me and said, if you need a recommender, let me know. And I was like, okay, this is a winner. And then went with my second OIC, who saw the career arc of like, okay, he's starting to take classes on that deployment. He was also from the Philadelphia like general area, so he had introduced me to people that had either gone to Wharton or Villanova and other Northeast schools. So, and he was just a genuinely nice person, and we had a good relationship, and that's why I chose him.
Gotcha. Well, that sounds like that there's a definite advantage there, in that you're able to get a recommendation from an academic having gone to a school, having gone to college, full time, college experience ahead of. So that's pretty cool that you could do that. Cool. Over to you, Liam.
Yeah, so I had two for MBA. My first was a lieutenant that I had while deployed. He then left the career field for security forces and became a TAC-P officer. So kind of had a similar experience in terms of transitioning careers, and had seen me kind of work during deployment side, and so he could speak to it. My second was also actually a professor from UMGC. I had a poli-sci professor who kind of taught like international security, who was actually security forces early on in his career and left writing policy at DIA at the end of his career. And so, kind of could understand the full academic cycle, already had a graduate degree, had seen me perform, in the classroom. And so it kind of felt like it balanced out having both military and the academic side.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did 2 military recommenders, so if that's helpful to anyone. And the way I got a ton of advice around this that helped me, and it was like the advice I got was you should get 2 people that like either really know you, really invested in you, and like that you would go out for beers with or go out for dinner with. Like that is your recommender. I got lucky and I spent my last 3 years as an enlisted guy at the Pentagon doing weird stuff. So I directly worked for a captain in 03 and a major in 04. And they were 2 individuals that, like, just like I said, they were like invested in me, invested in my career. They had watched me do the night classes and become a father and do all these things. And so when I pitched them on this business school thing, they were like, that's incredible. If you could, like, they're just really, really on my team. That being said, they reported to a 2-star and a 3-star, and both of them offered to write me recs as well. And I said no. And that decision was just purely out of that advice. Like I was like, it would look really great probably, but they just didn't know me. Like they didn't know what my motivations were. They didn't know why I wanted to go to the West Coast and do this thing. And so I just felt it would be like much more genuine coming from the 2 that knew me. And if I was still on the teams, like, I probably would have picked my first OIC and maybe like my chief to do it. For the same reasons.
Gotcha. And I'll throw a big +1 on that, just going with people that know you well. I think a lot of times people get very wrapped up in getting someone with a lofty title, but getting a genuine review from someone, a genuine recommendation where they can talk about specific things you did and how you made a difference in your organization is so much more impactful than just kind of a fancy title. And then one other thing to throw in there is often recommendations are kind of like the long pole in the tent in your application where you'll get everything in and you're just waiting to see that green tick mark go by that recommender. And if it's someone with a big title who isn't really investing in your success and who you don't feel really comfortable with giving a call and being like, hey, are you going to get this thing in tomorrow or not? That's a pretty high stress situation. So definitely 100% go with someone you know and someone you're comfortable reaching out to, making sure that they meet that deadline. Because if they're a big important person, that very important thing for you might not be a big priority for them. So make sure they're invested in your success. Well, cool. All right. I'm going to, and Devin, we'll throw it to you. We're going to talk about leadership experience and just having talked to a bunch of enlisted vets through service to school, there's a very common insecurity that comes up, which is I'm going to be competing against officers. I haven't led that many people. There's people, the company, company commander is been in charge of so many more people than me. And there's that kind of like common feeling that officers have an edge on leadership, which I disagree with. And just giving like kind of like one personal example from the private sector, like if you think about it, going to a consulting firm or an investment bank, you're typically, you're going to start out as an individual contributor. Once you get a promotion, an engagement manager at McKinsey has at most, I'd say 5 direct reports, if not usually 2 to 3. And so anything you do in the military, you're going to have such a leg up in terms of leadership on your peers, not just not in the military, but coming in from the private sector. So your leadership experience, regardless of what you did, is so much greater than so many other of your peers. So Devin, I'll kick it over to you to talk about how you framed leadership in your application.
Yeah, the biggest thing that admissions committees are looking for is Delta and not the Army unit. They're looking for like the difference in what your role, like what you're supposed to do in your role and what you actually did. Like, did anything you went above and beyond, stepped outside and went big, is what they're looking for. Sometimes that's people, sometimes that's leading people, sometimes it's doing other things. I think as Alex said, 430 classmates, maybe like 30 of them had leadership experience that were non-military. Like it's so surprisingly small. So even leading one person or 2 people like is meaningful, especially doing the hard or stressful things that many of you and us did. So that's important. And then back to the Delta topic, I was lucky enough, I just took a class that's offered here by Kirsten Moss. She was the director of admissions at the GSB for 10 years and the director of admissions at HBS before. And so she helped us kind of lay some of this stuff out. And it is truly potential. Like any time in your life or your career that my job was checking IDs at the gate, but I made this change so I could get people through 10% faster. Like why have you taken your agency and chose to change, like improve people's lives or improve your workplace or create an impact? And that is super important. And that is basically what I did my whole career or my whole application. I looked at my career through that lens and then asked myself 2 questions, like, what is the Air Force pilot going to put here? And what is the like special operations officer? Because I felt like they're either going to bucket me in Air Force or bucket me in like special operations. And how can I show up in a different way as a leader? And for me, that was like talking about individuals who I really cared for, that I helped them through tough times in their career or got them awards. And yeah, that's mainly how I focused on my leadership. I had 1 sentence and 1 essay about a mission I went on. I did not say anything about any other like actual bomb defusal work. It was mainly about what I loved about the people that I worked with. And it wasn't a lot of people.
Good stuff. Cool. Over to you, Liam.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say probably in a pretty similar thread to Devin, despite the fact that 4 years goes fast in the military and it's sometimes hard to get leadership experience. I was lucky in that I had a lot of leadership who looked down and said, hey, we'll give him a shot. We believe in him. And so I focused on kind of 2 themes. One was times and positions where I was there, where I was far and away the most junior person and almost like barely had, business being there, but we had senior leadership that said, hey, we think we should go on this one. And then on the other side of that, it was we worked to unit where after COVID, when they kind of released everybody to PCS, we got 20 new people in the span of like 3 weeks, and you had to get them all spun up for kind of like election missions for personal security around Andrews. And so I talked a lot about getting responsibility at the E5, E6 level as an E4, and just being told like figure it out, and having the ability and the opportunity to figure it out. And so I think kind of framing it as like I'm operating in the top when it's me and peers, and then like I'm lucky enough to end up in these places where I might not ordinarily be as an E4, was hopefully convincing at least to get me in.
Good stuff.
Uh,
Over to you, Austin.
it kind of multifaceted answer. I will start with, I was given advice from other kind of like top MBA enlisted either applicants or current attendees or veterans, and graduates, like connect, like build a spider web. And how being enlisted or how the military fits into that, great. But like make sure your personal brand and who you are very specifically stands out as long as you want it to. Because guess what? At the end of the day, it's a 4-to-1 ratio of enlisted to officers across the entire Department of Defense. So people don't actually know what you're doing unless you tell them. And then beyond that, they don't actually know who you are. And then beyond that, they're not going to remember your application unless you make it extraordinarily obvious. So I really just tried to focus on like the personal brands and career trajectories and like the underlying commonalities across them, which included enlistment, and just like really hammer that home. And then reiterating some of the things that Devin and Liam said, like the bottom up leadership, the teamwork, I think an emphasis in like communication skills, and then in terms of like highlighting or like hustling in some, how do you make things measurable, and then therefore later have a delta, is like talking about like attrition rates. And so like when your peers are already the best of the best, and you are constantly impressed by how capable, like people that used to be lawyers, people that used to be geologists, people that had master's degrees and chose to enlist, or leave the private sector and then become an officer and get one of 2 slots that's available globally to non-ROTC or service academy members. Like these are really impressive peers. How do you stand out, or how do you learn from them and like push that narrative forward and continue to like do good for those communities? And that's what I focused on.
Awesome. And so one thing I'm really going to touch on is, so first of all, admissions committees don't really know the difference between being an enlisted and an officer. Most people outside the military don't really know the difference. You're just kind of either a vet or you're not. It's binary. With that said, it never hurts to be different, right? So put yourself in the shoes of an admissions committee member. They're reading so many veteran applicants. There are so many veteran applications. And there's that famous Buzz Lightyear meme. And it's just like so many look so similar. So, you know, you're West Pointer with a 3.2 GPA infantry officer who went to Ranger School. Like that, every one of those things is impressive, but there are so many people with that profile. So like what makes you different? And I think having enlisted experience, you know, in many cases coming from a tough, you know, if you do come from a tougher background, you overcame some obstacles, you did some stuff before you served, you did a very tough job in the military, and you come with that perspective from having served enlisted, I think is something that will really catch an admissions committee member's eye, and it's something that you should really like lean into, you know, personally. So it's kind of my 2 cents on that. And I definitely want to leave time for some questions, but I do want to kick it to the group for one last one. So we'll start with Devin. What's next?
Yeah,
What do you
I
got?
am lucky enough to be heading to Nashville. I'll graduate here in about a month. My job doesn't start till September, which is a little weird but comforting. So I'm going to take the summer off with my wife and kids. I had another kid during the program. Happy to talk about that too. And we're just going to relax a bit. I'll start work in September. I'm going to work for a holding company that buys up tons of small businesses, and I will work in investments for about 6 months for them, and then I'll go be the CEO of one of the small businesses they buy. And to me, it's like returning to my roots. It's like going and getting paid a lot more to work with the people that I worked with in the military, but I have all the agency and all the leadership, and I'm so excited for that. So
Awesome. Liam, you're graduating as well. What are you up to next?
Yeah, so I'll be here for the summer. Notre Dame's hired me to build out the internal strategy for the business school around entrepreneurship through acquisition as a pathway. Was lucky enough to sit in on Devin's entrepreneurship through acquisition class a couple weeks ago at Stanford, which was awesome.
Cool.
After that, starting in August, I'll be a product manager at Capital One, and I'll be in the DC McLean office.
Awesome. Good stuff, man. Austin, you're a few years out, but what are you up to these days?
Oh man, I was not expecting the ETA. I've been doing ETA stuff, the whole different brand of conversations. I'm actually driving down to DC to hopefully get a signed LOI here soon after many close ones and some dead deals. But in lieu of this conference, like GovCon, I've been looking at women-owned, veteran-owned sort of entities and aging populations. So just trying to find the new win to continue to serve, but in a business owner capability and be able to have the agency to make those sort of decisions.
Awesome, man. Good stuff. And that's just for the group. Can you just say just describe briefly what ETA is?
I mean, people have been doing deals, buying and selling and bartering for thousands of years. I think that there's this new kind of swath of branding of like, how do we codify different areas of the marketplace so we know what sort of people are buying and selling businesses at certain size ranges? ETA stands for entrepreneurship through acquisition, which is really just the art or description of getting to a close and making a deal. So it could be $0, it could be $100 million. It is what you opt into and what you make of it. And I think that is some of the allure and also some of the pit of despair.
Good stuff, man. And where are you these days?
I'm in Philly. My partner,
Philly.
she's a pediatrician at the Children's Hospital here.
Cool, good stuff. All right. Well, we got one question already, and this is from Carter Hopkins. Says, how did you best answer the question, why now? And I'll kick it to the group if he wants to jump on that first.
I can hit this one. So I was lucky enough, I think, in my first 4 years that by the time I was finishing, I was kind of taking the lead motorcades for the president to Air Force One and Air Force Two, which is not something that I ever imagined they let E-Force do. And so I had this sudden realization that I for sure, by security forces standards, was going to get orders to mine on one of these days. Like eventually something was going to drop. It was going to be a really bad time. And so I'd had a bunch of conversations with friends at Secret Service and state and other places, and they'd said, hey, you can get out. We, finish school, we'll hire you. Because I still had the clearance, I still had the, the background and everything. The why now in terms of business was the realization on the way out, the more I hung around the state and Secret Service guys, was that it turns out that like those guys have similar lifestyles to the military, and some of that stuff was stuff that I didn't want to necessarily maintain. And so I found myself out and kind of on the way out and wanting to go into leading teams, but wanting to do it maybe not necessarily on the immediate military gov agency sort of look. And so that was something that I think resonated well during application time.
My read, maybe better or for worse, was, I was in for 10 years. I had a wife and a kid. And the way that I kind of sold it to her, like personal side, was we have one more PCS, and that's to business school. I didn't think I could convince her to go to Princeton or CBS for a couple of years to wrap. And so our deal was, all right, finish your degree at night, and then we can do that one move. To the school, it was very much like, I felt like I've been a leader, and my favorite part of my job was being a leader and the stress and things. And I felt like if I went back to school or just with an undergrad degree, like if I just went out in the world with an undergrad degree, I would be placed again in an individual contributor role. And that role felt soul sucking often to me. And like an MBA was that springboard to like, cool, I'm going to go to this place for 2 years and I'm going to leave, and I'll have like the stuff on my resume so people will hire me as a leader and a team, like more of a role an officer might step into, right? Just based on name. So it was more of a optionality, as Austin said, and an insurance policy.
For me, it was entirely timing. And I think that the answer who asked the question, it's look internally, and then second, also look at whatever internal sharing you did in your application and match it or augment it. For me, I focused a lot of my career focus on the watershed event that was the NIL ruling and what I thought it was going to mean for like the cash cows and financing people that were going to now need more mental health solutions in an underserved space. And I was doing veteran advocacy and also mental health advocacy and really focused on like the student athletes that were now going to be basically like professional athletes at institutions legally now instead of just in shoe boxes full of cash, and what that meant for mental, like basically the mental health marketplace, and the timing of it and why I would want to go to grad school and not be like working as a consultant or something like that. Like I want to be able to focus on those topics and be immersed in an opportunity to like do focus studies and things like that.
Awesome. Good stuff. Next question we have is from Nick. He wants to know any thoughts on the executive MBA program for people who have decent full-time employment already, but want to make the jump into business leadership. So
I'll jump on that. I'll jump on that first because I will say know a couple of. I think it's important to know a couple of things. One, there are differences also between executive MBA programs, night programs, and weekend programs, and some schools have all three of those options. And then secondary, or maybe even more important than that, know what their policy is on the amount of minimum years required to apply for an executive MBA. Some of them 6, some of them 8. They're not all the same. I don't know why that's different, but it is different. It's a school-specific thing. And then third, I think it's intensely personal. Like if you have a kid on the way, you want to get an executive MBA, you're working up on a leadership development program at like CBS or something like that, or like one of these like media and entertainment places that already have a salary that's higher than a post MBA like consulting salary. Like you already have a job that's like a top 1%. Like go do it. Like chase your dream. I think, and if you're interested in it, connect with people that chose to go to executive MBA programs at those places. I think that there are certain ones that are very, very, very strong. 2 Chicago schools, extraordinarily strong. Wharton, extraordinarily strong. The New York schools, extraordinarily strong. In LA, I think that UCLA and USC are extraordinarily strong. In California specifically, because of like media, entertainment, and finance. So certain ones punch up, and certain ones like they're almost like not even separated from full time.
I'll add 2 things to that I love every single answer plus one. One, really interesting. Also look when you're digging in and finding out like the year requirements and the weekend versus executive, also look at like what your full workload looks like, because there are some programs, like I will name Stern, this is not an endorsement, but Stern EMBA, you get full-time BAH, which is like wild if you're using your government benefits to get like that for a part-time program on top of your salary. So that is a really good thing to know. And then the second thing, like I think my biggest, it's a bit of a generalization, but if you're in a career that you love and you want to keep moving up in it, it's a great tool. If you are a pivoter and you're looking to change industries and explore, the time off and the internship and all of that is extremely helpful. So that's like a little decision tree that I tell people sometimes.
I'd also agree with these. I think the other thing too, we don't have a ton of context in terms of the career stuff, but often what I find is that like there's a lot of folks that I meet in the military who jump into something like military adjacent on their way out, and it's often a great career, but it's still pretty military adjacent, and you don't necessarily have a view of what else is going on in the world. So if that's applicable to this question, I would say go through full-time MBAs and see what career fields they place people in, and do a lot more research on those career fields to see if that's something you might be missing out on. And that, I mean, that applies in any career field you land in post-military. Is what I found in the full-time MBAs, just how many more doors are open than I realized were out there.
Yeah. And another thing I'll just throw in there as well about the MBA and part-time MBAs is that a lot of times if you're already in corporate America, your company may pay for them or at least heavily subsidize them. So if you want to save the GI Bill for your family or anything like that, that's a great opportunity as well. So that's something you definitely should look into. And this touches on Kyle's question as well, like the trade-off opportunity cost and all that. And Devin, I think you really kind of hit the nail on the head. Is that at the end of the day, do you want to get a new job? If the answer is yes, go full time. if you want a feather in your cap, you want to learn some new skills, build your network, go part-time or go EMBA. Let's see, we've got about 10 minutes left. So let's knock as many of these out as we can. So Kyle asked a very good one. He said, how would you recommend leaning into a tough/low income upbringing without it coming across as attention seeking?
I never directly talked about it, if that makes sense. It was always in service of showing a part of my personal brand or story, as Austin's been referring to. And so I would lean into like, I want to show grit or resilience here. So I will tell a little bit about a tough upbringing. It was never like, this is what happened to my parents. This is the time I spent alone. Like I was unhoused or homeless. Like I never really approached any of that. I would just be like, okay, right here, they're asking me about a time I displayed grit. And I was like, yep, I grew up in a low income family, non-stable household, spent some time unhoused. This is how that shaped me. This is how the military brought my like confidence and my abilities back up. And this is how that would help me at Stanford or help me at Wharton, like contribute to my class. And so it's always an accent, never like the main meal, right? A little appetizer.
Yeah, and I think that it's just always just be authentic. Because so like one of the things, so I came from, being transparent, I came from what I think is a fairly privileged background. I leaned into it. I talked about that's why I joined the military, because when I grew up, I saw people who were a lot less fortunate than me. I spent a lot of time overseas. And I said, well, I want to give back to the country that's given so much to my family, because my grandfather had come from a fairly tough background, used the military, done very well, and I use that as gratitude. So authenticity is key. Just be yourself. If you do come from a background, Devin, I like to talk about the accent. Just be honest, be transparent about it. And likewise, if you didn't, don't try to make up a story that wasn't there, because people can see right through that. So just own your story and own your why. Want to jump, we're a little short on time, so there's a couple good ones here. I think that JD MBA question comes up a lot. How do you all feel about a JD MBA?
I'll hop on that grenade, and I'll answer it in a couple ways. When I like pre-military, I thought I wanted to be a sports agent. I went to University of Alabama as a proxy. Like if I had gotten into University of Texas or Michigan and basically one of the top 5 swimming programs, I would have done there, because the goal was to get into a really good school that had an amazing athletic department, so I could eventually represent my peers and become not just friends, but their sports agent after I went to a good law school. Whenever I was in the military, I still kind of had this idea that like, oh, at the top firms or the people that Scott Boras is, if you're familiar with like MLB contracts, they all have JD MBAs. A lot of these new sports agents do not. Why do I say this? Well, you actually talk to people that go and get JD MBAs. 90, at least 2 standard deviations, if not more, only ever use one of those degrees. With very rare exception. Those are like usually niche jobs like private equity restructuring. And I would say if you are considering a JD MBA, my advice, whether you ask for it or not, is don't do it because you're just trying to potentially open a little bit more doors that otherwise would not be available to you. Because those people that are getting those JD MBAs, they're miserable for 3 or 4 years, because they're not getting the full value out of each one of their cohorts. They're overworked, and then they're still going to have to choose on which career path they actually want to do. That is my unsolicited advice. My other thoughts on JD MBA programs, especially if you actually want to like hop skip to a couple different institutions, like bi-coastal, or if you're one of those people, like if you want to go to like Harvard and Wharton, there's an option to do it. There's other grad schools to do it too. I think it's great for that. And if you're somebody that's just like, I want to work, I want to study more than an MBA would, and I want to have more fun than a JD only would, then do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend it. But that's just me. And I considered it for like 17 years of my life.
Just +1 the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think
that was so true.
I think we're programmed to often in the military program to get as many credentials as possible, and more is better, especially from a quantitative perspective. But that's a really expensive and miserable box to check.
That was really, really, really hard for me to get over. Like really hard. I cannot, like, I mean, I have goosebumps right now. I had a lot of conversations, and one of the ones that stood out the most was this guy that is an absolute homie. That was at Columbia Business School doing a JD MBA, and he looked at me and he goes, "Austin, I am more miserable than I am right now than I was in the Middle East writing up like people that I knew that were dead reports to their family." And I was like, "That's it. Like that's it." So.
The services schools JD team will not get a copy of this recording. Yeah, we have fun. All right. So being conscious of time, I'm gonna try to power through a few of these. I think that there are a few that come into groups. So there's a lot of questions about non-MBAs, but business adjacent things like an MS in analytics. I actually had a conversation today with Duke's masters in engineering and financial engineering. So there's like a lot of those type of programs. I'll throw my 2 cents in on those and see if the group wants to jump in as well. So there's some pros. You can do those a lot of times online. They will significantly enhance your resume when you're getting out. Like, so if you're in your last year and you can multitask and knock that degree out online, I think it'll help out. But those are very niche, and you have to have in my eyes, a direct end goal. It's like, I am getting this degree in business analytics because I want to do X. There's X job that I've identified that I want to do. An MBA is a great catch-all. Like, I got my major in business analytics. I went into consulting. If you don't have a laser focus on what you want to do, go MBA. And I'll kick it over to the group for some more feedback on that.
Yeah, plus one of that, Alec. And I think too, it's like some of those programs are only a year. So the other question worth asking is like, are you doing it because you want to cut down the experience by a year? Because I promised the MBA, the 2 years goes fast. But there's a lot of those career fields I think that you can get into from the MBA program, just like you kind of talked about, Alec, in terms of like majoring in business analytics or finding concentrations within the MBA itself.
Yeah, definitely. And then here, Liam, while I got you on the line, we got a question about Notre Dame being a veteran-friendly school. Is Notre Dame veteran-friendly?
Yeah, super veteran friendly. We had Alec out recently. But no, it's honestly been really cool. Trying to think, we had Adam Driver we had for drinks the other day, or a couple months ago. He's the man. He's local. They're very big on God Country Notre Dame. That's like a motto carved above the Basilica doors. They're doing, and I can kind of say they recently have been fundraising to add stipends, especially for vets with families or enlisted vets that are looking at the MBA program. And so this year is the first year that they've been doing that. But they want to have vets feel as though that the finances are not a huge part of the question in terms of coming to school. So I've had a fantastic experience and can't say enough good things.
Awesome. All right, and we've got one question to close it out. What do you wish you knew about MBA programs or post-MBA career opportunities in hindsight? And we'll go Devin, Liam, Austin to close it out.
All right. What do I wish I knew? I think on the post MBA, well, I guess MBA programs, what I wish I would have known before is the brand of the school, like, doesn't matter as much as you think it does. And I'm saying that because, like, I thought I would come to Stanford and I would be able to walk into NVIDIA and walk into Google and these places, and the options are there. But when you get to your school, you're surrounded by amazing people. Like, you are just like shoulder to shoulder with amazing people. And so it raises your brand overall, but the competition pool becomes new. And so it is like, hit the ground, like take a break between service and the MBA if you can, a little one. Celebrate when you get in, but when you hit campus, like, be ready to learn and absorb and understand that, like, the competition's not over just because you got in. Post MBA careers, I wish I knew. I wish I knew about a North Star sooner. I was thankful enough to find my North Star, but figure out why are you leaving service? Like, what is the thing that's missing that you want in your life? And I'm like, Alec is a perfect person to talk about this because I feel like his journey has done this as well. And like, that North Star can be accomplished through many careers. and not just one role or one company. And that will make you feel much more successful as well, help you steer away from some careers that might be prestigious or well-paying, but suck your soul out of your body.
I would say that your hands-on experiential learning opportunities within the MBA program and around it are just as important as what you learn in the classroom, because it's going to help you differentiate what you do and don't like to do. So I know that like CSP, if you can do a skill bridge, like what an amazing opportunity to go take a risk and like learn about a new industry. I did a build your own kind of pre-MBA internship for about 5 months that was, you know, huge in terms of just giving me a lot of new experience. And then the, you know, inter-year of the 2-year programs, the internship is fantastic in terms of just like take some risks and figure out what you like and what you don't.
I'll back up the JD MBA trope by saying understand a little bit about, or as deeply as possible, the brand or community experience on campus or beyond, and what the value of each one of those brings. Like Wharton doesn't have class on Fridays. If I did not get into Harvard, but if I had gotten into Harvard, one of the deciding factors was in undergrad, I specifically built a schedule around not having class on Fridays. And it might have been the tipping piece to still go to Wharton. I have no idea. I wasn't given that choice, but I really valued that time, and it allowed extra time to either do stuff with your family, stuff for exploring like entrepreneurship, traveling, whatever it might be. I valued that extra 24 hours really highly, and so did a lot of my peers. Secondary to that, and this is advice for vets, non-vets, an MBA is, yeah, it's time, pivot, business stuff is going, but it's about the people. Like it really is about the people. And there are peers that I have seen completely squander that because of like either shenanigans, not being completely truthful, or like not being present and just trying to just suck all the value out of the experience instead of being a giver and part of the community. And they will always lose out on the vast majority of the value of the alumni community, but also like have those relationships. I think it's a very personal decision, but try to match each one of those to what your preferences are and where you think that you could get lifelong friends from.
100%. So this is awesome. I'm so grateful. Devin, Liam, and Austin. So we want to give a big plug, Enlisted ExFil. So they are here to help you. In many ways, what Service to School did, they are now carrying on that mission for a community that really needs it, which is enlisted veterans looking to go to business school. You can get a Service to School mentor, and you can get an Enlisted ExFil mentor, and it'll cost you $0. So sign up for us. We'd love to see you. We'd love to help you out. And we want to get more enlisted vets into business school. So thank you all for coming out. And if you've got saved rounds or anything like that, reach out to us on LinkedIn or something like that. We'd be glad to help you out. Cool. Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks for having us, Alec.
Cheers.
My pleasure.